Chapter 19 is what could possibly go wrong. July 3rd, Coke and Pep enjoyed a relaxing pancake breakfast at the campground with their parents before embarking on what would turn out to be one of the most important days of their lives. So, we have the whole day to kill in Washington before the wedding tomorrow, Dr. McDonald announced as they cleaned the dishes. Where should we go? The Air and Space Museum? Museum of Natural History? Take a tour of the Capitol building? We could visit the Vietnam Memorial. Pep and I want to go to the Museum of American History, Coke said firmly. Yeah, agreed his sister. What? I didn't even mention that one. Why do you kids want to go there? Asked Mrs. McDonald. How do you even know about it? Pep looked at Coke for guidance. Before school let out, Coke said, they told us that next year the teachers are going to put a huge emphasis on social studies. So we thought going to that museum would really help us with our studies. But even more than that, it will help us learn the history of this great land. Yeah, Pep agreed what he said. It was a total lie, of course. Nothing had been said at school about social studies or any other subject, but Coke knew how to blow smoke with the best of them when he put his mind to it. Don't you want to go to the Museum of National History or the Air and Space Museum? Dr. McDonald asked. They have the Wright brothers playing there. You could see the Spirit of St. Louis. That's the plane Charles Lindbergh flew. We know, Dad, Coke interrupted. We've seen plenty of planes. Yeah, you see one plane, you've seen them all, Pep added Pep. Ben, they want to go to the Museum of American History, said Mrs. McDonald. That's a good thing. It will help them in school. You, of all people, should be supportive. You're a history teacher. It's just that I've visited that museum 3 or 4 times already, Dr. McDonald said, a little whiny. I'd rather go to some place I've never been. Mrs. McDonald shot her husband a look, one of those looks that said he could stop being selfish, that he should stop being selfish and think of his children. Coke was looking over a Washington, D.C. Sightseeing map. I have an idea, he said. The Museum of Natural History is right next door to the Museum of American History. The Air and Space uh, and Air and Space is right across the National Mall. Pep and I can go to American history while you two go to one of the other museums. That way, everybody will be happy. That's a great idea, Pep said. Then we can meet up when we're done. I don't know, Mrs. McDonald said dubiously. Please, Mom, Pep begged, making her best puppy dog eyes. Are you sure you'll be okay on your own? Bridge. They're 13 now, Dr. McDonald said. They're big kids. They can handle themselves in a museum. What could possibly go wrong? Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? Asked Coke, who in the last 2 weeks had been forced to jump off a cliff, dipped into boiling oil, drowned on ice cream, and gasped in a rest stop bathroom. Well, okay. Yay! The, Mc- the family got a late start into Washington because Mrs. McDonald had washed some of the clothes and needed to wait until they were finished in the dryer before she could leave. Coke used the extra time to load up his backpack with stuff as if he was going on a commando raid. The can of silly string he bought in the Miami Country Museum, the duct tape they got in Avon, Ohio, the frisbee from Bones that said TGF flying high on it, the little bars of soap that Maya had given them in the motel, other knickknacks he had picked up at shops along the road. You never know what you might need in an emergency. They got on the metro and uh, rode it to Gallery Place, Chinatown again. From there, they had to switch to the red line for one stop, and then the blue line for two stops until they reached Smithsonian. That stop empties out right in the middle of National Mall, a large grassy rectangle that is surrounded by the Smithsonian Museums. It was a glorious day. The sun was high in the sky, but it wasn't too hot. The mall was crowded with people out walking, jogging, riding bikes, and rollerblading. Coke pointed out the Capitol building in the distance straight ahead, and the Washington Monument only a block or so behind them. The kids knew they didn't need to be at the museum until 2 o'clock. That was what the cipher said. July 3rd, 2 o'clock. Nobody was quite ready to separate just yet. Coke pulled, pu- Coke pulled out his frisbee and threw it to his dad, who threw it to his mom, who threw it to his sister, who threw it back to him. Pep was getting pretty good with a frisbee, he had to admit. She had finally learned to throw it flat, straight, and true. After a while, they all flopped onto the grass and had a little spontaneous picnic, with trail mix and snacks that always seemed to magically appear out of Mrs. McDonald's purse. Coke had to remind himself why they were doing this. He knew somebody or something was waiting for them inside that museum. He knew it could very well be someone who wanted to kill them. Why walk into a trap If he and Pep didn't go, he reasoned, whoever was waiting for them would come and get them. It could be tomorrow, or it could be next week, or next month, but there was no avoiding it. And if he was totally honest with himself, he also had an intense curiosity to know who had been sending them all those ciphers and what they wanted. Coke checked his cell phone. It was 1:30. We should go, he told Pep. The Museum of American History is a gigantic, blocky looking modern building. There was a line of people waiting to get through security at the entrance. Their parents walked the twins to the end of the line and gave them a family hug. You kids are getting so big going to museums all by yourselves, Mrs. McDonald said. Be careful in there, warned their father. There are pickpockets everywhere, you know. We'll be fine, Pep assured them. Don't worry about us. On the inside, she was thinking that pickpockets were the least of their concerns. Mrs. McDonald pressed a $20 bill into Pep's hands and told her to go to the cafe in the museum if she and Coke got hungry. We'll stay in touch by cell phone and plan to meet up right here when the museum closed at 5 o'clock, Mrs. McDonald said. Don't be late. Don't be late. That the late McDonald twins, if something terrible happened, that's how people would refer to them. Coke shivered and tried to put such thoughts out of his mind. Pep wondered if she would ever see her parents again. She tried not to cry, taking one last look at her mom and dad as they walked away. While the twins waited on the security line, Coke played a mental video of the things that had happened to them in the last week. The incident with Archie Clone at the first McDonald's restaurant, matching wits with Mrs. Higgins at the Cubs game in Chicago, visiting Michael Jackson's boyhood home, figuring out all the ciphers, those sadistic bowler dudes, the amusement park in Sandusky, where they nearly drowned in ice cream, sliding down the outside of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Dad going crazy at the Hoover Historical Center when he found out that Hoover was the guy who founded the vacuum cleaner company. He thought of the miles and miles of highway they had traveled, the strange places they had visited. Yo yos, mustard, duct tape. It had been some trip. They had traveled all the way across the United States now and seen everything from the largest egg in the world to a museum devoted to Pez dispensers. And now they were at the end of the line. This is it, Coke told his sister. Let's go, Pep replied.